I'm Tracy Ingram, and I'm a virtual specialist for the Georgia Department of Education for STEM and STEAM. I'm also an elementary teacher. And today we want to talk about year-long STEM and STEAM project ideas. I know you're already thinking about next year in the back of your mind, even as you're working on what you need to do this year. So as we think about those things, what would be the best idea for you and your class to take on next year, hopefully with a project that can last several years at least, so that you don't have to keep coming up with a whole new project every year. You can learn from what you're doing and build on it and get better at it and just breathe through it and enjoy it. So let's take a look at some ideas. You want to start by asking, what's your problem? Talk to your students. Let them help determine a problem that they want to solve or a question they want to answer. Maybe there's erosion on your campus. Maybe there's a need for a garden, or the garden you have might need to be improved. Maybe it needs a watering system added or a composting system put in place. Maybe you need to increase the amount of food for your pollinators in your garden, or maybe you just need to start a garden where there isn't one. What types of wildlife can you see on your campus? Take a look at that and see what you can do to increase the number of birds or the number of pollinators or whatever wildlife you're seeing that's a good thing for your campus. You want to see what you can do to help support that. Is there a problem with trash on your campus? Maybe you need to come up with a solution for improving that. You can take a look into the changes in the neighborhood over time, whether those changes have been positive or negative. Study that. What's the history of your school and your neighborhood? What can you learn from it? And how can your students help make a positive impact on the community? You can study what's already growing on your campus, from plants to trees. How did it get there? Was it put there purposefully, or did it just occur on its own? How can you help maintain and improve the beauty of your campus? It doesn't have to be just with plants. Maybe your campus might need some benches added, some seating areas. Look at your campus and ask yourself, what could you and your class work on? If you have the whole year to work on it, what could you do to improve the beauty of your campus, the functionality in an enjoyable way of your campus? Are there enough accessible play areas for students who maybe someone has hurt their foot or broken their leg, maybe they're in a wheelchair, whatever their challenge might be at the time, do they have somewhere they can easily access in your outdoor areas to enjoy? Take a look at improving that if need be. So we want to remember it's okay to have the same STEM and STEAM project each year. If you choose one that's right for you and your students in your school, you should be able to build it, work on it, maintain it, improve it, expand it, dig deeply into that for years and years and years. And that's going to make it take a whole load off you. If you do the same thing, then you already are building on your past experience. You're not having to reinvent the wheel every year. You shouldn't have to be out scrambling for materials, scrambling for ideas, racking your brain and exhausting yourself every year coming up with some wonderful new thing. If you can and you have the energy for it, go for it. But you certainly don't have to. You can dig deep into that same project that you did this year. Maybe everything didn't work great with it this year. Well, that's okay. What did you learn from that? Improve on it. Expand it. Repeat your projects year after year. So for one thing, as students are coming up through your school, they know what they have to look forward to. They know that when they get to your grade level, this is what they get to do. And it lets you become such an expert that you are going to have the best time. Teaching can and should be fun. You should enjoy it. You should be reaching across all the content areas through this rich experience of this project and really giving your students a memorable learning experience while you're having a lot of fun doing this with them. Whatever you do, you want to start with STEM and STEAM journals. From the very beginning, suppose you're starting from scratch next year, brand new project, don't know what you're going to do. Maybe you've never done a year-long STEM project. You want to start with STEM and STEAM journals. It doesn't matter what form it takes. Maybe you have a 2-pocket folder, maybe you have a composition book, maybe you have a sketchbook, whatever's available to you. Some teachers just staple together some paper, whatever you can come up with. But right from the beginning, when they're brainstorming and thinking of those potential problems they can solve, making those lists so they narrow it down until the project is chosen, all of that needs to go into the STEM and STEAM journal. And as they draw their sketches and put their measurements and make their lists and document the entire process, then you're also allowing them to create this fantastic keepsake at the end of the year they can take home with them, and it's going to help them remember all those wonderful things that they did with you, all those wonderful things that they learned. That's their evidence. That's their memory in that book. So you're giving them a tremendous gift by making sure that STEM and STEAM journal is written in on a regular basis, and then they take that treasure home with them at the end of the year. Those STEM and STEAM journals are going to also be extremely valuable to you as you're looking at things you want to change for the next year. Maybe you want to go about this a little differently. Maybe you want to do less of this and more of that. What do you want to bring into it that you didn't think of at all? There's all these things that you'll develop, and their evidence is in that STEM and STEAM journal. So pick a few and go make copies of them before you send them home for the summer. So you can look back at that and help yourself make those even better plans for the next year. Now, one idea is to create and maintain a butterfly or pollinator garden. This is an example of a butterfly garden here at my school. This is Lynn Lastinger Elementary. We're in Tifton down in South Georgia. So there had been a butterfly garden, but it had been virtually abandoned and was in terrible shape. So our kindergartners took that on as a year-long project, and they partnered up with the Coastal Plains chapter of the Georgia Native Plant Society. And those fantastic ladies helped them. They brought plants out, they came out and taught them lessons, and they brought this little garden back to life. As you can see, it's a very small space. You don't have to have much space. They do not have raised beds, and that's okay too. So they have a little pathway that goes through the middle. They can go through there and look for insects and watch for pollinators. They can study what's going on with these plants. These are why these are the plants that are chosen for this garden. Once it was sort of brought back to life, it needs maintenance. It has to be kept up all through the year, every year. And it can be expanded on, it can be improved. So this is the second year of this project. Last year was a tremendous amount of just trying to build. And then, of course, we had the shutdown and they didn't even get their whole time. But it's definitely an ongoing project. They can work on this for years. And this could be done, while this was our kindergartners, this could be done with any grade level. Another option would be to create and maintain a kitchen garden. And I did an entire presentation just recently on the creation of kitchen gardens, what they are, why you would want one, the standards you could address with them. So you can look through the past recordings of presentations and find that one. You can reach a tremendous amount of social studies standards, not to mention every other single content area through the building, the maintaining of a kitchen garden. You can study the history of your area, your region, the state, our nation, and really, if you wanted to, even the world, all through the lens of a kitchen garden. That's a project that could be taken on by any grade level. It certainly does not have to be any particular grade level at all. Anybody can get a lot out of that. And it could be partnered with more than one grade level, for sure. Another project idea, this one was taken on by our pre-K students here at Lynn Lassinger, but it would be a great one for kindergarten or maybe even first grade. This is an example of the beginning of the year STEM journal entry, and the teacher took a picture of the tree for them to help them have that reference when they got back to the room. But what she did to start with was take them on a walk. At the very beginning, first week of school, takes them on a walk around the campus, and each child got to choose a tree that would be their tree. It would belong to them the whole year long. So she took a picture of their tree for them, and then they started their STEM journal by sketching that tree, trying to label what type of tree it was. And they returned to that tree regularly through the year. Look at how it's changing. Shine a flashlight down into the crevices of the bark. Look with a magnifying glass. You'd be amazed if you go out in the daytime and shine a flashlight into the bark of the tree, you'll see all sorts of things that you didn't see before. Let them really look closely. Let them feel of it. Talk about textures and patterns and smells and colors. Let them observe it throughout the year. What lives in the tree, on the tree, around the tree? What does the tree provide for us? How does it benefit our campus? How does it benefit people in general? Are the roots visible above the ground? Does the tree produce anything? What does it produce? I mean, it just expands and expands into the things that they can learn, all from really getting to know this one tree that they chose. So if you take a look here, this is another example. She took a picture later in the year as they're observing it through the seasons. And she gave them an example picture also of the roots above the ground for this particular tree. So you also want to ask with the children, does this tree need any care from us? And how can we take care of the tree? What does it need us to do? There's lots of wonderful things you can learn about the parts of the tree, what their functions are. There's a lot of things that you can get into with this. Another option for a year-long STEM project would be to study and chart the weather at your school. You can talk about the different types of tools, the many different types of tools that can be used to study and measure the different elements of the weather. You can talk about the patterns that you can see in the weather. You can talk about the best type of chart to use to record your observations and your measurements. You can use this for understanding of weather patterns and how do weather patterns help people? Why do we need to know what the weather patterns are where we live? How about people who live at the coast? How does it help people to know what to expect at different times of year? Where can we find information on the history of the weather patterns where we live, across our state, and across our nation? And what can we find out when we compare what we're seeing in our weather pattern study to the data that we can access from the past? Are we seeing any changes? So there's lots of things that you can do with this, and you would want to make sure that they're recording all of this in their STEM and STEAM journal. And then you can have a larger collection chart that maybe you keep digitally and you pull it up on your smartboard for the whole class to look at together as you're adding to your data collection. But they need to be putting that individually in their STEM and STEAM journals. They need to make notes about what types of tools you used that day. Were you checking the wind? Were you checking the rainfall? Were you checking temperature? What were you checking? And what did you use to do that? And what was your data that you gathered? Another option for a year-long project would be to create a wetland area on your school's campus. So you would want to start by making sure they understand what is a wetland, what types of wildlife live in a wetland area, what can we use to create a wetland area for our school, and why are wetlands important. Now, of course, the picture you see here is of a little small pond feature. And you can find really detailed how-tos on how to create these things. There's lots of them out there, but if you check the extension agencies and outreach agencies provided by most state universities, they have a lot of information out there for you. Now, in the state of Georgia, we happen to be blessed with a tremendously rich marshland area on our coast. And it's important for students to know that we have some wonderful things going on in Georgia that not all states have. So what do those marshlands offer that benefits the entire world? What is the purpose of those marshlands? What are they doing? Let them study that. And then even if you create a little pond area like this, it helps them make that connection to wetland areas out across our state. So you really want to help them understand what lives in these areas and why they need that water. Now, I have seen people take something like an old John boat, an old canoe, something that maybe has a hole in it or whatever, nobody wants it anymore, and you can put some liner in that and partially bury that in the ground, put a little water pump in it, and make a really cute little wetland area. You could also take a barrel. They have all these plastic barrels. Probably someone would give you one, but if not, I think you can buy them for about $10. And if someone would cut that in half, I'm sure you could get a parent to do that for you. Someone would cut that in half long ways so that you could set it on its side, bury that in the ground. You might not need a liner, but if you do, you can just get some plastic and put in there. Put a little pond pump is very cheap. You put that in there and just create your own little wetland area that way. Explore the different ways that you could create one of these and work on that. If you spend a year getting it built, then you're still going to be able to work on it the next year, maintaining it, possibly expanding it, maybe adding more plants. There's always going to be more that needs to be done. And thinking about these garden areas, the different types of plants, a great project would be to design, build, and maintain a composting system. Now, you could work in partnership with other grade levels. Maybe there's a grade level who's working on a kitchen garden. And maybe there's another grade level who's working on the wetland area, and another grade level who's working on the pollinator garden. Well, all these different people would love for you to make some compost for them to use in their garden. You first got to decide what's the best system for you and your students to use. You want to talk to your administrators and make sure they approve the method that you want to use, because if you don't maintain it correctly, you can have an odor from that. So you want to make sure it's maintained correctly, that it's in a well-chosen spot. How are you going to keep it turned and going like it needs to go? Sometimes people have a crank on a barrel and they turn it. Sometimes they go in with a pitchfork and turn it every so often. Do your research. Find the best way that works for you and your students, one that your administrator approves. And then you can work on your own or in partnership with other grade levels. If they're already growing plants anyway, why not take your compost and put compost on some of their plants and not on others? And then all of you get to benefit from watching the difference. Measure the growth of the plants. Do the ones with compost seem to be healthier, grow bigger, produce more? Does it make a difference? So this is a study that you can work in partnership across the grade levels. You don't have to come up with the plants and do all that. If somebody else is already growing plants, then just tell them you want to work with them so that you can check and see if your compost really makes a difference. Make a partnership with your lunchroom. Find some different ways that you can work cooperatively within your building to get lots of different wonderful things done. Another thing that I really love is to study the history of your neighborhood, your town, or your county where your school is located. Very often, people can tell you a lot about the country where we live, the state where we live, but they know next to nothing about the history of their own hometown. So take a deep look into that. Talk to the local library, talk to local historians, have your kids talk to their parents and grandparents. Find pictures going back as far as you can for the location of your school. Really study how the area where your school is located has changed. Has there been a lot of growth? Has the type of land use changed? Really take a look at that. It gives students a tremendous sense of kind of belonging and gives them some greater strength to their roots. When they understand the place where their school is, their place where they live, it's really valuable for them. You can reach across the content areas with this. You could get into some art projects. You could maybe arrange for some of the older people in the neighborhood to have some videos made for you so that they can talk about the history of the neighborhood. Share those with your students. Save those in a little archive so that people can look at those in years to come. If there's no area in your school where the history of the school is displayed, that would be a great project for you to take on. Find those photos going back as far as you can and have students build a really beautiful history of your school and your little neighborhood and town, and put that on display somewhere where any visitor to your school can come and see it and learn from it and enjoy it. You might also publish it digitally so that people who are not able to come to your school can see that and benefit from it. Now, on a visit to Drew Charter School in the Atlanta area, I saw them doing this in a way that was so inspirational to me. They have set the ultimate example for studying where they are, the history of where they are, and doing beautiful and artistic things with that information. So I would encourage you to go to their website. You can see it here on the slide, drewcharterschool.org. Go to the Who We Are history, and you can read about the history of their school. And I really encourage you to learn from what this school has done with STEM and STEAM in the knowledge of their local history. Another option for a year-long project would be to design and build some new interactive play areas on the playground. So again, another thing that Drew Charter School inspired me with their outdoor play areas. And these photos are not of Drew Charter School. These are of some homemade play areas that different people came up with, and they're stunning. So those photos are there for inspiration. However, you can visit Drew Charter School's website and maybe learn more about what they've done outside. But I never thought as much until I visited that school about the importance of adding things to the outdoor play areas that encourage children to think artistically and to think like engineers. There's an area where there are just stacks of bamboo poles that are maybe 5 and 6 feet tall that are just leaning up, and the students can take those with some different little straps and things that they have, and they build things with them while they're outside. I mean, it's so simple, and yet it's genius. It's wonderful engineering work. They call it their tinker yard. There's also a wonderful area where children can go out and on just plexiglass, they can paint and then wash it away with squeegees when they're done. I mean, goodness, how come we hadn't thought of this before? It's fantastic. So there's a lot of different creative things that can be done. Really need to consider how accessible are the different play areas in our schools. Are there really lots of wonderful things that students can do, even if they may be limited physically in some way? Maybe someone has a broken arm, a broken leg, a hurt foot. Maybe they are in a wheelchair, whatever it is. Do they have a place where they can go and enjoy something outside? So take a look at what you could do to improve the outdoor play areas at your school. You might be surprised how many things you could come up with that wouldn't cost really hardly anything at all, but would tremendously improve the creativity and the problem solving type thinking, the critical thinking skills of your students while they're having a great time. Now, another thing that we mentioned at the beginning of this was the possibility of looking for problems with erosion on your campus. It could be a really tiny spot, or it might be a larger area. There could be a place that's suffering from erosion. Your students could design and implement a solution for whatever your erosion problem is. Now, there's also places you can find information about this, but these are 3 websites that I recommend. One is called Life as a Garden, and they have a really detailed experiment that you can do where students will take 2-liter bottles that you cut in half, and they put soil in them and essentially make their own soil erosion tables. You're going to do an experiment to see the effect of plants and rocks on helping with the erosion problems. I'm going to show it to you in just a second. The other website is Project Learning Tree. It has some wonderful information on how to prevent erosion, what erosion is, great stuff. But I want to point out, Project Learning Tree is not just a good place for erosion. It's a tremendous resource for teachers for lessons on many, many topics. So I strongly encourage you to check them out, really dig through their website. The other one is the Captain Planet Foundation. If you've never been to their website, you need to go spend some time there. They have a lot of lesson plans, a lot of resources. They offer grants for educators. It's a tremendous resource on many different subjects. But they do have a wonderful lesson already in place about erosion. And it just happens to feature the Little Grand Canyon or Providence Canyon right here in Georgia. Let's take a look. We're going to go out of the presentation for just a second, and I'm going to show you these 3 websites so you'll know just what I'm talking about. Let's take a look. This is the one, the Life as a Garden website, and this is what you would build. You see you've got the 2-liter bottles, and you cut them, put the soil in them, do the rocks, do the plants. One doesn't have anything. One has rocks, one has plants. And then you're going to pour water in there, and you'll see the difference in what happens, how much soil is lost. It's a great little activity for students to work on. I'm going to go back up to the top so that you can see. It gives you a supply list, and it takes you through it step by step by step. So this would be a really fun thing for you to do with your kids as you're working to think of what would be the best way for you to solve that erosion problem on your campus. Now, the Project Learning Tree website has a lot of resources for you, and it tells you how to prevent soil erosion. It talks about the different types of erosion. It talks about the wind erosion. You've got erosion caused by water. If you go all the way through, it has a tremendous amount of information and resources for you. But also, like I said, don't forget, just check them out in general. They have a lot of things beyond just erosion. So be sure you check them out. And then that other website was Captain Planet Foundation. And again, you can apply for, they have many grants. They're not terribly difficult to get. I mean, sometimes some grants, you know that it's just going to be so many people trying to get that grant. Captain Planet gives away a lot of grants. So I would encourage you to try to get a grant from them. Also would encourage you to really look at all the lesson plans and resources that they offer. This is a fantastic lesson, and it's based on Providence Canyon, which is right here in Georgia. So it's a perfect choice for us. great thing for background as they're working on whatever your erosion problem is there on your campus. So let's take a look back at our presentation. Another option for a year-long project could be more focused on the arts, although it would reach across the content areas. Now, you might choose to have your students study the history of your area and write a play about it. Or it could be based on the state or our country, or maybe it's not about history at all. Maybe it's something else, but they can work to write a play. That will take a while to get a really good one done that they work on cooperatively. And then take the time to make the costumes and the props and the lighting. And then if they're going to enact this play, probably in your classroom, you would need to film it. And maybe students could help take on the filming role depending on your age of your students. If they're old enough, then they could be in charge of the filming, the editing, what angles are best to film from. Where does the lighting need to be placed? There's so many different things that they can work on through this. It truly could be a year-long project that you work on a little at a time. You could have you could call it a movie premiere night, where you let parents know that this movie is going to be released on the school web page on a certain night at a certain time, and kind of have a virtual viewing party. You could really make a wonderful event out of this that would wrap up the end of your school year. Remember, whether you're doing an art show or you're putting on a play, these things can be shared virtually, and we can find ways to really be creative about it so it makes it a lot of fun. Also, think about when they're writing their play, if there's a way that they can act out their parts so that they keep a few feet apart, then maybe they won't have to keep their mask on the whole time. That's just whatever works best for the rules and safety at your school. Another option for a year-long project would be to start locally. You might not think there's any local artists where you are, but I bet you'd be surprised. There usually are. And you can start there. Find a local artist. What style of art do they work with? And then expand beyond that into your region, and then beyond that to the state. Maybe you want to study Georgia folk art. But let your students really learn about this, look at lots of examples of it, possibly have a virtual meeting for your students with an artist, or if certainly if one's able to come to the school, whatever works for you. Once they've done this study, then they can create their own example of this style of art. And then you can have an art show that you're going to need to plan. You're going to need to figure out how the work will be displayed. How will this be shared out? So it truly could take you the entire year to build in this layer by layer. Now, you can find a list of arts agencies. It's www.artsgeorgia.net, and they'll help you find local artists. Another option would be for your lessons in studying these artists would be to go to the Booth Museum. That's a Georgia museum. There's a series of social studies presentations, STEM and STEAM social studies projects that I did 3 different presentations on. And the Booth Museum was focused on in one of those presentations. So if you go back and look at the recordings of past presentations, you can see a really in-depth presentation on what you can do using the Booth Museum. It's a tremendous resource. Now, another thing you could do would be to study Impressionist art and let students create their own example of this style of painting, because it's a little bit easier. Maybe students are not, maybe they're intimidated by a certain, more realistic form of art. But folk art is less intimidating for students, and Impressionist art is less intimidating for them because it's more forgiving. Folk art really lends itself to something that students can produce fairly easily, no matter what their talent level. They can produce something that kind of goes along with that as they learn about what a professional artist would produce. So then Impressionist art is the same way. It's more forgiving. They can take something and make a beautiful impression of what they see in nature, and it's just a little bit more forgiving. But let's take a look. I'll show you very quickly. Let's go out of the presentation and we'll take a quick look. If you go to that Arts in Georgia website, this is what I mean, where you can go down. If you scroll down through there, it goes through the different regions of Georgia and gives you different arts agencies. And if you get in touch with these arts agencies, they'll be able to help you find a local artist. And then the other resource was the Booth Museum. And they have all these different, let me show you where, let's see. It's boothmuseum.org/teachers. And then as you scroll down, they have all these different program guides, and you want to click on the program guide to find all the information for that topic. So you would just click there, and maybe you wanted to do art that reflects something from the Cherokee or something from the Creek or whatever it is your choice might be. You'll find some examples and some inspiration there. Let's get back to our presentation. It's just like everything else. The key to it is finding what works best for you and your students. Now, if you've not done it already, maybe somebody shared this link with you and you didn't get there directly. But if you've not been there yet, you want to go to community.godot.org, join the community. You want to join the different groups that are of interest to you, whether it's, I hope you're going to join the elementary STEM group if you've not already. And maybe you want to join the art group or the music group, math or science. There's just so many groups that you can join. If you want to be notified when they put new things in these groups, you subscribe to the group, and it'll keep you updated on the latest trainings and resources that are out there for you. In the elementary STEM group, you can go to the Documents tab and scroll down through there to find information on past presentations. And there's even a document there that has a link that takes you directly to the page where all the past presentations have recordings there for everything that's happened for STEM and STEAM this year. It's a tremendous resource. I hope that it will be helpful to you. I hope that maybe this has helped you think of and find some ideas for year-long STEM and STEAM projects that you can use in the future. And I hope that you will just really remember to breathe, relax, have fun. If you're having fun and you're doing something that's exciting to you, then that's going to be passed along to your students, and they're going to have more fun, and you're all going to have a lot better day, and those students are going to remember what they learned because it was such a wonderful experience. So thank you for all that you do and all the work that you put into these students, and I hope that you will have a wonderful year next year with your STEM and STEAM projects.